And can I please ask for a roll call?
Councilmember Craven?
Here.
Councilmember Kilby?
Here.
Councilmember Tremblay? Here. Vice Mayor Santangelo?
Here.
And Mayor Mulchay.
Present. The purpose for our meeting here at 4:30 today is to go into closed session. We have closed session items. I'm going to ask our city attorney to please read the purposes for recessing into closed session.
Yes, our closed session this afternoon is conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4. Number of potential cases is 2.
Thank you very much. And do we have any public comment on this item? See none, and I see no one here in the chamber. So at this point, we're going to recess, and we will reconvene at 5 o'clock.
My microphone on. I'll call the Camarillo Board of Library Trustees meeting for August 24th to order, please. And let the record reflect that all the directors are present. We're going to have a flag salute. And I'll ask Mrs. Craven, would you join us lead us in the flag salute, please?
Please rise, place your hand over your heart, and join me in the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. So we got the approval of the agenda. We're going to get down to public comments. Any public comments for the library board tonight? Seeing nobody make a mad dash, we'll get down to consent calendar.
Move the approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. That passes unanimously. Discussion item, oral communications. Any, yeah. And I believe we'll put the microphone on. Where is it? Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, City Council, and staff. It's a joy and honor to discuss the City of Camarillo Public Library Annual Report. I want to share some of our highlights from last fiscal year from July 2021 to June 2022. So I'm happy to report that we saw life and a new sense of energy enter the library again. There was a significant increase in people coming into our doors, checking out our materials, and attending our programs. For instance, in fiscal year 2020-2021, we reported 180,683 physical items checked out. In comparison, this past fiscal year, we doubled that amount to 390,166 items checked out. This year, the library issued 4,673 library cards, which is 2,178 more than the year before. We also had 161,519 library visits compared to those few months, which was only 23,048 from the year before. Library staff went outside building walls and supported community rebuilding by participating in events at local schools, parks, and community centers. The library also acquired new online workforce development tools such as Coursera and North Star to support pandemic recovery. In addition, we introduced Press Reader, which gives our library patrons access to over 7,000 magazine and newspaper titles from across the globe. Library staff continued to highlight several initiatives relating to literacy for children and adults. For instance, our youth services launched a 1,000 books before kindergarten in March to promote reading to newborns, infants, and toddlers. In Adult Literacy Center, our adult literacy coordinator worked with adult learners to build and develop reading and writing skills in English with 2,711 hours spent in improving literacy in Camarillo. The library started to offer Heritage Month celebrations to unite community members and provide a space to learn about cultural history. Our popular programs resumed. For instance, our Camarillo Reads One City, One Book with best-selling Kate Quinn on Rose Code had a turnout of 89 people, which is pretty good for a pandemic. Also in September, the Russell Fisher Business Collection Coordinator hosted a 4-week work development series that led to a community job fair offering more than 150 job opportunities. So in total, in a year, the library hosted 381 programs with 5,649 people attending. These are all great numbers to see, even as the library faced COVID surges through the year. I'm so grateful to city leadership, staff, and our amazing community for their dedication and support of the library. This current fiscal year that we're in now brings exciting developments, particularly with 7 days a week service and evening hours. The Camarillo Public Library Annual Report will be posted soon on our social media channels and our library website, and I will also be submitting this report to the California State Librarian. And that concludes a very brief annual report presentation, and I'm happy to address any questions.
Any questions from anybody here? No? Okay. Well, that's a very good report, exciting. We're on the move.
We're on the move.
And we're really happy about the progress that we're making. It's great that we're open, I think, 7 days a week, too. That's a real milestone. And I know I've gotten a lot of really great feedback on that, and I'm sure you have, too.
Yes, it's awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, any other comments from any trustees? Okay, seeing none, we're adjourned.
I'll open this meeting of the Camarillo Sanitary District Board. Ask the record to reflect that all board members are present. Are there any public comments to the Camarillo Sanitary District Board? Seeing no one come forward and having no cards, we'll move on to the consent calendar.
I'll move the approval of consent.
Second?
The motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Please vote. Assuming that Mr. Kildee voted yes, I can't see it, motion passes unanimously. Oral communications from board members?
Is this the time, Madam Chair, for CASA?
Yes. Okay,
So-
Mr. Tremblay.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So both Mrs. Craven and I attended the California Association of Sanitation Agencies annual conference a few weeks ago. It was an excellent conference overall. Mr. Matsuoka from our staff attended, which I thought was great. I found many of the presentations excellent. They had good substantive content. They were valuable and relevant. By the way, the reason we're all wearing masks, should we indicate? Apparently there was an exposure in a meeting that we attended, so it was suggested that we wear masks. So hopefully, can you hear me okay with the mask on? Okay. I think we've got these panels between us, so I guess we can take it off. Anyway, the items that I want to focus on from the conference were, you've heard in the last several weeks the fact that we have a treatment plant that is going to need to be, in essence, fully replaced within the next 5 to 10 years. Its components are deteriorating. I'm not trying to scare anybody. We're doing fine. We meet all of our standards right now, but at some point, equipment wears out. By contrast, we also have a very large collection system that collects wastewater from throughout the city of Camarillo and sends it to that treatment plant. And we have to pay close attention to that collection system. So one of the items that was presented on at some length at this conference was the work that the state of California is doing, basically updating or upgrading its standards, its waste discharge requirements for collection systems. The draft waste discharge requirements soon will be going from 20 pages to 85 pages. It is a significant uptick in the requirements, and they are consequential, and the Camarillo Sanitary District, City of Camarillo, will have to comply with those when it's updated. There were 5 specific recommendations to evaluate our current sewer system management plan compliance. That was number 1. To evaluate our most recent sewer system management plan, they call it SSMP for short, audit. To evaluate what's called the CWIX system. That's the water quality system where people have to, from the water treatment plant or wastewater treatment plant, have to actually input the data that's coming through in terms of the constituents to make sure we're meeting all of our current constituent standards, to update that, to update our training program, and then to complete the Water Board's pre-inspection questionnaire. There are some very significant timelines associated with this, so I won't bore you with it all, but that was one very important presentation. A second important presentation, and we all saw this in the news. Anybody in the news? Anybody see the news relative to New York City and the emergence of the polio in New York City wastewater system epidemiology? There's a whole science now on wastewater-based epidemiology. It's kind of, think of it like the canary in the coal mine. And the fact of the matter is that about 75% of the United States population is served by municipal sewer systems, and 50% of those of patients who are suffering from symptoms like COVID or other things have, sorry to go there, but have fecal samples that test positive, and they shed RNA, and that lasts several weeks. So having a treatment plant epidemiology that can cover that and discover that is important from a public health standpoint. And the public health agencies are getting much less data now because there's just PCR data. People are doing so many home-based tests, so the wastewater testing becomes even more important. So there's a presentation on that, a presentation on cybersecurity for wastewater systems, which I think is very relevant. And finally, my colleague, Mrs. Craven, very deservedly received, and this is rare, received from CASA a lifetime membership award. Charlotte was the president of CASA. I'm on the board of directors statewide, but she was the president of CASA. She has participated for, oh my goodness, 35 years, and fully participated in legislative matters, et cetera. She has been like the star at CASA in terms of local elected official participation, so she very deservedly received that award. And that is it from me. I'll bring it to a close and say congratulations very much to Charlotte.
Thank you. I've enjoyed every minute I was involved at CASA, including the State Legislative Committee and the Federal Legislative Committee. I attended the same sessions that Mr. Tremblay attended, with the exception of 2, and knowing that I would not be around for too long, I volunteered to go to 2 that I was not really interested in: tracking plastics and PFAS, or those plastic things that none of us can pronounce, but we are concerned about being in our water supply. I'm not sure how to say it. Both of these reports were at a level I couldn't understand. They talked jumbles. I'm not really good at acronyms, but they talked plastic acronyms to the nth degree, and then they put a lot of numbers after them. And it really, especially the PFAS discussion, had little impact on me because I had no idea what he was talking about. He was talking about 2 different tests, and the tests aren't completed, and I'm not sure why they even bothered to have this report at the meeting. Because it looked to me, looking around the room, that most people didn't understand it. The one that the session that I enjoyed most was on something that I have been very active in, and the city of Camarillo has been very active in, and that is getting legislation passed at the state level, which has been signed by the governor about a year ago, and it took effect January 1st, that all packages of wipes, whether they're Clorox wipes or baby wipes or whatever, have to be marked with a toilet and a don't flush, because they are not flushable. They have cost City of Camarillo hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars because the things clog up the works. They just kind of mush together and they all meld into one great big bundle, and then you have to stop everything and get them out. Castro Valley Sanitary District put together a very, very nice video. It's on YouTube, and we're going to play it. It's very short, but it gets the point across. And I thought it was the best way to get this point across.
In Castro Valley, everyone has a role in maintaining the sewer system, and one way you can help out is by only flushing the 3 Ps: pee, poo, and toilet paper. Can you flush pee?
Yes.
Can you flush poop?
Yes.
Can you flush toilet paper?
Yes.
But what about wipes? Even those labeled flushable? Flush diapers? Flush food? Sponges? Cat litter? Bandages? Cotton balls? Hair? Underwear? Feminine products? Medication? Pee, poop, and toilet paper?
Yes, yes, yes.
Learn how you can help prevent sewer blockages at cvsan.org/wastewater.
See, we can have fun at sanitary district conferences. There was one other, and we'll have it next time. So, are there any other comments? Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned.
I don't want to follow that, but I'm going to open up the successor agency, meeting of the successor agency. Let the record reflect that all members are present. Any public comments? Anyone want to speak for the successor agency? All right. Get down to consent calendar.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, please vote. Passes unanimously. Oral communications. Presume there are none. And we are going to adjourn meeting of the successor agency and reconvene the meeting of the Camarillo City Council. And again, let the record reflect that all council members are present. Thank you, Mr. Tremblay, for going over the reason why we all have masks on. I was going to do that then. But I want to get down to approval of the agenda. Do we have any amendments to this agenda? I do want to make note that I'm going to hold our 5 o'clock session. I'm going to try to stop at 6 o'clock so we can recess back into closed session. So whatever we do not finish at our 5 o'clock session by around 6 o'clock, we are going to push to our 7 o'clock session. So just let everyone know that. With that, we're going to jump right into presentations. I got 3 of them tonight. First, the West Ventura County Business Alliance Top 10 Community Award winners. And I believe I have CEO Nancy Lindholm here, and also Chair of the Board, Don Simmons.
Have them come up over there.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Nancy Lindholm, CEO of the West Ventura County Business Alliance. And we're so pleased to be here to announce the awardees of the 2022 Camarillo Top 10 Community Awards. Just for those who may not be familiar with this tradition, I want to give you just a quick background. This is our 55th year. Nominations come from the public, and we thank them for submitting those. We do have a selection committee that's made up of sponsors from the event who decide, make that tough decisions on who the awardees are. And finally, I wanted to let you know our celebration gala will be October 7th at the Sarah Center. And now I'm going to turn it over to the chair of the board, Don Simmons, to let you know who the awardees are.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. My name is Dawn Simmons. I am a resident of Camarillo, as well as a business owner. My business is Edward Jones here in town, and as you've stated, I am the chair of the board for the West Ventura County Business Alliance. So all of that said, this is very exciting for me to be here. So I want to give you who the 2022 awardees are. First off, starting off with Youth of the Year, we have a very wonderful, strong female. Her name is Itzel Fernandez. I'm not sure if she's made it in here. We have a wonderful Educator of the Year. Her name is Sarah Perry. Our Volunteer of the Year this year, I believe, is here. Her name is Mary Fish. Our Public Servant of the Year is Kelly Long. And our Service Organization of the Year is in attendance. It is the Camarillo Old Town Association. Our Entrepreneur of the Year is Lindsay Carnett, being represented by Christina Chastain.
I'm here. No. I'm Lindsay.
Oh, Lindsay, I apologize. Lindsay is here. Our Business of the Year is Slate Bistro and Craft Bar. Our Man of the Year is Mr. Dennis Reed Miller. Our Woman of the Year is Lynn Jeffers. And last but certainly not least, our Stan Daly Lifetime Achievement Award winner is Mr. Paul Rockenstein. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's give everyone a round of applause. That is excellent, and looking forward to that award ceremony. Next up, we're going to have Southern California Edison, and with us, I think we have Mr. Andrew Thomas.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and to the council. I count this as a kind of a historic event, my first time presenting to you all. So thank you for this opportunity. Hopefully not the first or the first of many. My name is Andrew Thomas, and I'm the new Government Relations Manager for Southern California Edison. Rudy Gonzalez, who's served your city for many, many years, is still with us. He's moved up a little bit, so I call him my manager and my boss. And so you have a great opportunity. The energy and eagerness that I have to serve this city will be coupled with Rudy's long knowledge about how to get things done. And so I'm very excited to work with you. I have some information I want to share, but it belies the idea that we already have been in progress speaking with the city about how we can make things better. And so as much as I have a Baptist message with a Catholic amount of time, I'll try to keep this kind of short. Don't laugh or I'll come back. But I do want to present a few pieces of information that we can share with the city and start this relationship to make things better for the citizens of this community. So you probably already had from Rudy, I think early in February, address of the wildfire preparation that was being done. I have one or two slides from there. And then the focus that is going to be ongoing is the available resources. The idea of knowledge is power is a great adage, but implied knowledge is even better. And so we're going to be working together, already having started, to make sure that the information I'm sharing today, which nobody has to get carpal tunnel writing down, will be in various places on our websites and places in the city is going to be posting so people can learn about how to get services, medical baseline support, how to get backup battery chargers and things of that nature. So we'll go through the slide with the assistance of Christy, and I appreciate being here with you. Next slide, or next. Oh, I have a clicker. How about that? Many people know us as Southern California Edison. We cover 50,000 square miles of area, have many stats that you can see there. You will not be quizzed on that. 1.4 million power poles and other things. Nobody lives here in 50,000 square miles. You live in this city. So what this, for me, as I come into this, is just the knowledge that we take from working in a vast amount of areas, that many of them are high-fire areas, like your city is. High-fire areas are designated by the CPUC, and it definitely is something that directs and mandates our attention to take this learning from all these areas and bring it to bear to serve your city better. Earlier, we did roll out the wildfire mitigation plans. As a utility, we are regulated by various entities to make sure that we're not just delivering power, but doing it with the ultimate primary objective of doing it safely to your cities, and that's what we'll continue to do. So I'm just going to hit on real quickly a couple things about our hardening the infrastructure, bolstering situational awareness, enhancing our operational practices, which goes to the communication mechanisms that can help and need to be improved, and definitely with your feedback, we'll continue to do that. And then talk about some measures that we're doing around the world to mitigate fires here locally. I'll go past this slide because, frankly, I forgot to take it out because I know my time is limited, but it does speak to the idea from transmission to distribution. We're involved in every aspect and trying to do so as safely as possible. Even at the bottom where it talks about solar energy, we're definitely about safety and conservation. So we're working across all areas to make sure we're delivering our product in the safest and most efficient way possible. One of the areas that starts with is how we address the residents, or actually your residents. We don't have any. You have residents, and how we contend with those. We have various ways that we'll service, and a lot of this information will be posted on site so they can get to that. But it talks about offering information through mobile devices and how people can get alerts that will share about PSPS outage alerts that will be enrollment opportunities for persons to get involved with that. One thing we're working and expanding is our translation services. So for over 120 languages, including American Sign Language, we are trying to make sure that we can speak to all of the populations that are in your city. So we're constantly trying to be aware of, again, not just keeping the lights on, but making sure we're keeping information available to everybody and having respect for the diversity of your city, including the citizens who may be facing challenges. We have partnered with 211 to help customers with access and functional needs. So all those things are a part of what we do in providing those services that may seem front and center as far as utilities are concerned, including rebates and portable batteries and the generation for customers residing in high fire areas through a website called marketplace.sec.com. Again, these will be posted in various places in the city or on your city sites, working with persons here, and on our website so people can get to that information. Our basic thrust of how we do what we're doing is to contend and combat and mitigate issues by hardening the grid, enhancing operational practices, and bolstering situational awarenesses. And just a few points about that. Cover conductor is the I won't say the highest form of protection, but it is a most viable one economically, where we're covering the wires that traverse the city. Many people have seen those wires where, obviously in windy conditions, that's where a spark can be generated, and that's where many of the concerns that happened in the past have come. Cover conductor is a great way to mitigate those concerns that people may have, and we have a plan that we'll share with you, highlight now and share later about what we're doing to help mitigate those challenges by doing cover conductor. Fire-resistant poles are a very important way to mitigate challenges, and so we're in doing those. Protective devices, so obviously, persons have experienced shutoffs. We know that they're not the most pleasant thing, and you look up and your neighbor is on. Well, that's because in certain areas we have circuits and install things where we can shut off circuits in particular areas, which is a great way to mitigate challenges. And while it is convenient, it's a great way to help keep a whole city from going dark, being able to functionally channel it down to certain areas. Undergrounding is the one that most people say, hey, I want undergrounding, and it is a great way. It is the highest cost aspect, and obviously with certain terrains it becomes very challenging. But we continue to look for ways to underground our utilities the best we can. And then microgrids. San Jacinto High School is a pilot of doing that. A microgrid basically can be something that's connected to other grids, but also can operate alone. So something like a high school, instead of it being out, it can still be functioning while other areas have to be serviced. The one thing that I wanted to start emphasizing is the idea of communication. As you see here, there's a picture of a drone, and so I definitely want to make sure that you and the citizenry understand that we're not looking for Hoffa or anybody else. We're using these new technologies to get to spaces that are more difficult to traverse or get to. And we have a cascade of information. To the right, you'll see, sorry we missed you. These are an example of a door hanger that we'll put on a resident's door if we're not there to acknowledge that we're coming to do this service. So as we're doing these things to be able to inspect poles or see other areas, we are not trying to be intrusive. We're not going to do anything but inspect that equipment. And we're going to have a cascade of information from phone calls to door hangers to let persons know that we're here to do a aerial inspection, or we're doing vegetation mitigation. Those are the kind of things that we have to improve, because we have heard in the past a person have called and say, why are they here? We do use some contractors, so we're making sure our contractors know how to have the Edison standard to make sure that we're not intrusive when we're doing that necessary work in your city. Vegetation mitigation is a very important aspect. Your vegetation canopy is what makes a part of what makes your city. We honor that, and we do go with standards of checking with your city arborist, avian, bird scientists, make sure nesting practices are followed, because we know citizens are very much concerned about that. But one of the greatest mitigations are trees and limbs getting into lines, and we definitely want to make sure we're working with the city. So there is a communication when they come out. There is an expectation we will be professional in conducting those services and cut to standards that are approved by your city, and to keep that vegetation safe, but also growing and thriving. And then PSPS, public safety power shutoffs, is something that most people know. I hope they do know it's not an arbitrary thing. It's a mechanism. It is a last resort mechanism to mitigate challenges, particularly those mitigated by the Santa Ana winds and other things that do come up. And so it is a tool that we use. We'll talk briefly about the cascade of how information goes out on that. But it is, again, it's not arbitrary. It is a scientific decision based on a lot of different tools that we'll be putting in place to keep our cities safe. This slide is a little difficult for me to see and maybe for many of you. So the summation is this information will be available in other places, so nobody has to strain. But it basically just says that as we use certain sciences to detect when winds are going to be at high levels, we have that forecasting that starts us into a cascade of reaching out to the city to let citizens and the city know that this is a possibility. People are put in place, and what happens when there isn't a PSPS shutoff is at times when they're getting close to those levels, people are preparing for that, and then there's a stand down. So when there isn't one, we're still preparing in certain instances because winds are getting to certain levels for one so that we're not behind the curve. And we'll talk about some of the tools that are available. We do use the various tools, and the one thing I would take on this is at our PSPS alert that we share with the city, you as a citizen can have the information through whatever medium, text messaging, phone calls, emails, to be aware of that cascade. So, obviously something that could have to be done, you're in the loop, so your preparation is at its highest level. Bolstering some of the tools that we have, weather stations, weather modeling, which is another thing that we're using. Fuel sampling, as much as people look up for trees, sometimes the brush that's on the ground is the fuel that will mitigate a large fire. And sometimes when we're searching the cause of an outage, I've heard in my newness with Edison that they'll find a crispy critter on the ground. One of your wonderful local birds may have grabbed something and took off with it, dropped it, and that rattlesnake, squirrel, or whatever may have hit a line, and that's the thing that sparked, and it falls to the ground. So our searches are always to protect the line and make sure it's safe, but we also have to canvass that whole entire area just to make sure that we know what is a mitigating factor for any kind of temporary shutoff or other kind of shutoff. So our men and women who patrol those areas use a lot of these tools, including wildfire cameras that can see areas that they can't get to rapidly, to make sure that they say, okay, I see in this area that something has fallen onto a line or something else has happened. So these new technologies are much like when I grew up watching Wild World of Sports and Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer. You hit the ball, it landed, they knocked it in, and you clapped, and that's about all you got, and you were happy with that. Well, now if you watch golf, they have red lines to show you how high the ball went, how fast it went. They can see the green, they can see the way those technologies are making watching golf improved. And we're trying to be as innovative with the technology that's available to keep the city safe. And so we definitely applaud and thank you for allowing where we are putting those cameras and other things up to make sure we can see the landscape and make sure everything is safe. And I'll just close again with other technologies that we're using to detect issues that are going on with our systems, asset detection. That's why we use some of the drones to inspect poles. Some of these poles have been around for 30 or 40 years, and so we have to maintain and replace them at times, and sometimes it does include having air support with helicopters coming in to replace those, and we do a certain amount of door knockers and information to the city so they know when they're coming through. This is a stat sheet that I'm going to kind of skip by that because if your power is out, you don't care that we're 130% on something else. So we'll talk about that some other time. But what is important is down at the bottom, I think viewable for most, is that little truck down there. We have community crews that do come out. They're dispatched when there are PSPS events. And we want everybody to understand that those crews are for the community. They are dispatched, and you can know when they're dispatched by signing up for the PSPS alert that says this will be on the corner of Carmen and whatever street. And those trucks have water, they have charging stations, they have bags if you have medication that needs to be refrigerated, they have snacks. So those trucks are dispersed when there is a challenge, and along with having a community center, which I'm sure you probably have a designated place where your community service location will be. And that's where we'll continue to try to service the community until the mitigating issue of winds or whatever has died down. This is a slide that I've shared with the city, and in fact, I think the city has already started certain communications. It is information that can be had by the city and by the citizenry. SEC.com wildfire, SEC.com PSPS alerts. All these things are forward-facing tools that we use and that you can use in conjunction with us to share information. Even the idea of community meetings that are posted there We've had recordings where we've done things with other cities with fire, and we're open to doing with you, to make information available that you can post and share for later times. So I wanted just to give this a focus because it's where people can find medical baseline information about rebates and other support tools. If it's not known and the city people can't get to it, it's not going to be the resource that we intend it to be. So I've been working with your city manager and others to make sure that these are going to be available. I think I just met a Ranit who shared about your city scene website that we can also post information that visually can show some of the tools that we're making available. So this will be presented again and in our ongoing relationship highlighted so persons in our communities or in your communities can be aware of how to do preparedness training, things that they can do to make themselves safe and benefit. And just so, because of the kind of learner I am, I've seen sites where you see all these links and you get home and it's, what is it supposed to look like? These are just two examples. The one on the left is the medical baseline site that has a menu where you can pick and choose information. The one on the right is where rebates and other support information can be gained. So I welcome persons to go there regularly and often to get information that can be a resource, much like our medical services. We have, we go to the doctor and then we finally go to our website and see that they have recipes and all these different things that you have as part of your medical benefit, but unless you go there, it's not going to benefit you in knowing about them. So I welcome anybody and everybody to go to sec.com and see the plethora of information that's available to support you and the city. The city also has support through a public safety partner portal where they can get very specific information about circuits and outages that will be coming or planned outages. They can look and see that work that has been done or will be done through the public safety portal. And we also have something called public safety portal office hours. So many of the cities come to these biweekly sessions so they can get updated. Much like when I've signed up for something and later on I forgot the password, the office hours are just persons who've signed up in the past when the city has been very responsive, thank you, to send names of who are going to be on these portals, and then finally when they use them, they're like, I forgot how to access them. So we're continuously having these kind of support sessions so those who are signed up for these portals can go on and get information that will be helpful to the city. And I will work with your public works and with your city manager and others to continue to proliferate that information. A slide so nice I had to show it twice, so we'll just skip on from there. And your circuits. So obviously we know your circuits. Somebody was saying, well, we need to do something to proliferate that so people can know what circuit they're on. I don't know if I want to make that a campaign, but we have a very important aspect of knowing your circuits, and we have some planned efforts towards your circuits. And so one of the things I wanted to show in concluding was a capital improvement map. This is at sec.com capital improvements. And so for those who enter in, they'll see this initial slide. And when they put in, they can go into something that looks rather ominous as far as the information. On the right, what you can't see is a legend that you can access that shows you what all these different dots and things mean. So it's layered, so you can actually go back a layer and say, I just want to see the power poles are going to be replaced. I just want to see where there's going to be covered conductor being done. And it's all an overlay. So it doesn't have to look like this. You say, I want to look at these type of projects, and it'll show you, as you can see, there's supposed to be blue dots that you can see there, which show you some of the transmission upgrades are going to be done in the city. So these are tools that will be utilized, offered, and continuously highlighted so that we can continue to make information available to the city and do other partnerships, because I know the filming that Renee wants to do next month is seeking PSPS informationals that we can make available and record so they can be posted and citizenry can be able to look at that type of information. The closing admonition for me, it would be as I'm open to listen as much as I've been talking now to find out where your other issues and concerns are and continue on that legacy that Rudy Gonzalez has started to support this city, but definitely advocate for signing up for those PSPS alerts and being able to share that back and forth on how we can make our notification processes, our resources, and our presence better for the city. So with that, I'll draw it to a close. I apologize if some of the screenings were too small, but again, this is my first time here, so I'll be better suited next time. But I do thank you. I know there's some events and conferences that are going up that I hope to be at, and hopefully if you're there, we can confer, but I will be available to come into the city to find out what specific issues. In fact, I'm supposed to be meeting with the Supervisor Parks and some others to also find out some of the issues there. Her initial response was about charge ready, to make sure that we can make as much as possible the ability to have electric vehicles have charging stations throughout the region that are accessible to your entire citizenry. So that's an important aspect too. With that, I will conclude. Thank you for your time. These resources and the presentation will be made to the city, and I'll definitely be open to any questions from the council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. Yeah, questions?
Yeah, Andrew, just, I want to thank you for being here, and I encourage you to be here as much as you can. And I know there's a lot of criticism, but I want to give you some praise. The last 4 years, it's light years from what it was with public outreach, technology, slides, informing elected officials and citizens how to get information is way better than what it used to be. And I know there's a long way to go, but I appreciate you being here. I look forward to working with you very closely, I'm sure, as long as my other colleagues and the citizens out here too. Sure. And, you know, we've gone through a lot in this state, and, you know, hopefully it's made us, you know, a better, you know, system that we've got, a more reliable system, and, you know, try to keep the costs down as much as we can. So I just wanted to, you know, thank you so much for being here, and, you know, keep on what you're doing, and, you know, we'll make the situation palatable. So thank you.
I appreciate that. I'll look to listen and learn.
Mr. Tremblay?
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Thomas, for being here today. I really appreciate it. And I don't know if that quote is for attribution, but I wrote it down. I think you said a Baptist message in a Catholic amount of time. Is that for attribution? I like that.
You can use it.
Okay.
I just...
Yeah. But thank you for your presentation. But I have some serious matters that I want to chat with you about. And there are three. They really deal mostly with the T&D side of Edison. And the first one, and there have been multiple outages in the east side of the city this summer, and elsewhere in the city. And most recently on August 6th, there was a lengthy outage. And the reasons for that were not immediately apparent going to the public safety portal. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me why?
There are times when the initial reason is not identifiable. And so there are mechanisms, as I'm learning, that as it goes forward, you may go and go and go and see unidentified, and then it may not be, unfortunately, until after it's resolved on the reason was a particular issue. So if you are looking at the portal at any particular time to say what is the cause of the outage, it may not be initially posted when you get there, but they'll continue to survey until they find it. So for example, if they do have an outage and they discover it, they have to walk the entire and monitor the entire circuit before they can actually conclude the reporting on that. And as they conclude and walk the entire circuit, other things they might find may have contributed to something that even though they may have found it earlier. So it is a progressive aspect in the causal reporting that has to kind of continue to go through. And I have had cities call me later to say, why did that happen on the 16th? And the reporting on the 16th, 17th was there, but it was on the 18th to say it was because of this. So sometimes it's not immediately identifiable, even if they do get the power back on at a given time.
Just to follow on that, would you be willing to provide our city manager with an email pointing to, specifically for the June, July, and August outages in the city, and the reasons for that, and where we can find that on the portal so we can read about it?
Okay.
I appreciate that. So two more questions, two more issues. One is I think a lot of us have signed up to receive outage alerts from Edison,
Yes.
but I'm not getting any. What I do get is an outage alert from my cable TV provider that says there's an outage, but I don't hear anything from Edison. Has there been an issue with respect to the text communications from Edison not getting out?
I have not heard there was any issue that they're not getting out to folks, but if you're reporting it, it's definitely something I'll be looking into. No, there hasn't. I know there was some transitioning. Last November was a challenging time for us as far as those historic winds that they had,
Right.
And
Right.
they discovered that there were some mechanisms that need to be improved, so there was some upgrading that was going on. So those should now have been in place, but if there are still places where persons are not getting outage updates, that's something that obviously will be my marching order to find out and get that updated to you and the city manager and others.
Could we hear back from you as to the status of that matter and whether or not there is we have experienced it and I've received calls on it, so I really would like to know. And the last one is a really serious issue. St. John's Camarillo Hospital, which is otherwise known as St. John's Pleasant Valley Hospital, they have had repeated power outages 4 times in the last year. Most recently, on July 18th, the power was out for over 7 hours. It was intermittently restored, but it continually went out. The good news is their emergency, as they need to be, the emergency generators kicked in and the hospital ran on emergency power. But the difficulty is that it's my understanding that, and it's a hospital, and it has emergency contact information with folks at Edison, some very specific people to call. Well, they called them, and they couldn't reach anybody, and no one responded. They were left in the lurch. They really didn't know what was going on. And the ultimate understanding that I have is I think you have and I'm going to mess this up, but hopefully I'll articulate it right. You have a technical operations team, this is my understanding, and you also have a communications department. And the debrief, what happened is the technical operations team didn't communicate with the communications department. And ergo, the emergency contact person was not there. And it was crickets. There was nothing on this. And the most important aspect of this is if the hospital can't reach anyone, if no one is home at Edison, even at the emergency contact number, to me, that's absolutely unacceptable for our community. It literally can be a matter of life and death. So I have 2 questions for you. Now, what assurance can you give us and our city residents tonight that Edison is going to correct this situation immediately? And secondly, will you commit to providing a written response to our city manager within the next 30 days outlining the steps that Edison is going to take to correct this? Because it's a really serious matter. So sorry to ask you 2 questions at once. But what assurances can you give us tonight that someone is working on this?
I think what I would say to that is obviously it's a very important matter, and it's gotten quite a bit of attention. From that matter, there are quarterly meetings, and there has been a plan of action that's been set up from this. There is an account manager, as you alluded to, that is in charge of that location. I won't go into the personal matters, but there was a kind of a toward event in that person's perfect storm, if you will, between that person experiencing a toward event at the same time as this happening. This person has been historically on par for everything that's been going on. So there has been from that meetings with the CEO and the staff, the leadership of that hospital, with our senior leadership team from Edison. Okay. The persons in those positions that you were talking about have been involved in a plan of action to mitigate that, but also improve future communications is also being put in place. So I will stand for my colleague who has, definitely done a great job as I'm coming on board and hearing her great management of her duties in the past. There were those issues now that are in place to make sure that exactly what you're talking about doesn't happen, not only for a hospital, but other facilities that there are account managers assigned to. And yes, there can be, I'll speak to that. I'll say yes, there can be a looping in on the action plan to the city on what that has done, so those kind of things are not only not going to happen, but the improved communication so that they can be ahead of the game on that as well.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I'll look forward to seeing that written response from you to the city manager that loops us in on the action plan so that we don't have a repeat of that issue.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And welcome aboard.
Oh, thank you very much.
Any additional questions? With that, Mr. Thomas, thank you for your time. Thank you for the presentation.
I always try to share a quick personal thing. My name is Andrew Thomas. My wife's name is Deanna Thomas. It makes sense she's my wife. But her maiden name is Deanna Thomas, so if you ever see me with her and she says he changed his name when we got married, just go along with it. It makes life a lot easier.
Thank you very much. We have a third presentation on the Coastal Cleanup Day. It's my understanding we have Jessica. Jessica, I'm probably going to mispronounce your last name, but you tell me if I got it right or not. Is it Olette?
Very close.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Olette.
Olette. Okay.
So good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, and staff. I am Jessica Olette, the City of Camarillo Stormwater Program Manager, and I will be providing information about this year's 38th Annual Coastal Cleanup Day event in Camarillo, which will be held on September 17th, 2022, from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. Coastal Cleanup Day is an international event, and cleaning local beaches isn't the only aim of Coastal Cleanup Day. Another important goal is to document and study the type of trash that is collected for information on where it could have come from and how long it would take to disintegrate. Ever since its inception, more than 30 years ago, International Coastal Cleanup Day has seen over 6 million people volunteer in 90 countries. Last year, at Camarillo's 2 locations, we had over 90 volunteers remove 380 pounds of trash, with food wrappers and plastic pieces being the largest quantity of trash collected. As you will recall, last year's Coastal Cleanup Day event was the first in-person event since 2019, and although these numbers are down considerably from prior year's events, where Camarillo averages about 150 to 250 volunteers and 700 to 900 pounds of trash removed, we are very grateful to those volunteers who continued to keep Camarillo beautiful. With the exception of 2020 and 2021, Camarillo has averaged between 160 to 190 volunteers at the Mission Oaks Barranca site, and the Cayugas Creek site has averaged around 60 volunteers. Since 2017, these volunteers have removed almost 2,500 pounds of trash and recyclables. Although the Cayugas Creek site tends to have less volunteers each year than the other site, larger quantities of trash are removed. In 2020, Coastal Cleanup Day was more of an individual clean up your own neighborhood event, and the city did not host any specific sites, which is why there are no records indicated on the slide for the year. However, we are very grateful to the 15 volunteers who removed 283 pounds of trash and continued to keep Camarillo beautiful. Last year in Ventura County, 1,685 volunteers removed 16,425 pounds of trash and recyclables from 16 inland and coastal sites. The Ocean Conservancy has not released the 2021 results of the International Coastal Cleanup Day event, so these are the results from the 2020 month-long event. Statewide in 2020, over 16,500 volunteers removed over 118,000 pounds of trash and recyclables. As can be seen in this table, the top item collected in California was again the cigarette butt, with over 190,000 collected statewide at last year's event. In the United States, over 81,000 volunteers worked together to collect and remove over 2 million pounds of trash and recyclables. Internationally, over 200,000 volunteers removed over 5 million pounds of trash and recyclables. Similar to California, the number one collected item around the globe was cigarette butts. Camarillo will again be hosting 2 locations for this year's event, and I want to take the time to thank the council and city staff for making this possible. One cleanup site is in the Mission Oaks Barranca, which is located below Mission Oaks Park at Mission Oaks Boulevard and Oak Canyon Road. Volunteers should meet in the grass area next to the tennis courts. The second location is in Cayugas Creek. Volunteers should meet at the creek at the intersection of Creekside Road and Paseo del Campo. Since we are trying to make this a zero-waste event, we encourage volunteers to bring their own bags, reusable water bottles, and gloves, but we will also supply those items along with a data collection card to record statistics on what they are removing from the waterway. This information is put into the Ocean Conservancy's international database. As it may be a warm day, we also encourage volunteers to apply protective sunscreen and wear appropriate attire, so please no flip-flops. The terrain in the Cayugas Creek is not suitable for strollers or small children, so we encourage volunteers with small children to come to the Mission Oaks Barranca site. Also, as a token of our appreciation for their service, we will have a limited number of tote bags and reusable straws to give to volunteers who come to clean up our waterways. As you are aware, part of the annual event is to collect data on the trash volunteers are removing, which is compiled into a worldwide database by the Ocean Conservancy. Although we will provide data cards at the event locations, we encourage volunteers to download and use the Clean Swell data collection app in order to record their finds and be counted towards the volunteer and trash totals for Camarillo. Volunteers can check out their cleanup history, so anytime, anywhere, they can see the impact they have had on making our creeks and oceans a cleaner and healthier ecosystem. More information on this app can be found on the Ocean Conservancy's website. Again, this year will be held on September 17th, 2022 from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. I want to thank the City Council and City staff for again supporting this important event in Camarillo and in helping to keep our environment clean. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Thank you.
I do know that, I know several of us have attended this in the past. It has been very rewarding. There's plenty of trash, as we all see, plenty to clean up. I clean up my front yard on a weekly basis because I have the tornado vortex trash, whatever, in my yard. But I'm absolutely going to attempt to attend this as well. So
Great.
thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.
We're coming up on my self-imposed 6 o'clock deadline, but I really want to get through consent calendar.
Move the approval.
Well, hold on. Gee, you're quick on the
You said
draw.
you wanted to.
It's my understanding, I know we have a quick update from Carmen Nichols, our Assistant City Manager, on an item N.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and City Council. To clarify the requirements of the professional services agreement under consent item N, staff recommends an administrative revision to the professional services agreement. And what it would do is identify an hourly rate, and it would revise a statement in both Exhibit A, that's the compensation item, and Exhibit B, from changing it from an installment arrangement to read as follows. And I did put it up on the screen for your convenience. So it would state that consistent with Section 5.3 of the Professional Services Agreement, in the monthly invoice, consultant will identify hours worked per project and will be compensated for hours worked at the rate of $200 per hour, not to exceed $50,000, commencing September 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023.
Are there any questions in regard to that amendment? No? Okay, and I should note that in voting on consent calendar, I will be abstaining from item T, as in Tom. That's in regards to the William Homes. That's, I have a direct conflict of interest in that this project is well within 500 feet of my family's business.
Move the approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second the motion.
All right, with the amendment on item
yes.
N.
Yes.
The changes.
All right, everyone clear? Please vote. And that passes unanimously with myself abstaining on item T. All right, with that, we are pretty much at 6. Are we good for going back to closed session? All right, we're going to recess the items V, W, and X, in addition to oral communications, we're going to take up in our 7 o'clock session. So at this time, we're going to stand in recess, and we will be back at 7 o'clock. Public comments. And do we have any comment cards? I have no comment cards. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak, come up and speak before the city council? Going once, going twice, no takers. Okay. We're going to we're doing some cleanup, finish up the items where we left off on our 5 o'clock agenda. That is items V, W, and X. So we're going to start with items V, zoning ordinance amendment. Hi, Jackie.
So, good evening, Mayor Moshe, members of the City Council. The item for your consideration tonight is a city-initiated zoning ordinance amendment. There are three main components of the ordinance amendment. The first is a proposal to establish a new procedure for a director-level conditional use permit, or CUP for short. Currently, the city has a conditional use permit process to allow for certain uses where special consideration is needed to ensure that the use is appropriate for its location, and typically includes conditions of approval to ensure compatibility with surrounding properties. The Planning Commission is the approving body for a CUP and requires a noticed public hearing. The proposed ordinance amendment would create a new process for a CUP that is subject to the review and approval by the Community Development Director. The process would be appropriate for uses that still require a level of discretionary review, but not to the same extent of a traditional CUP. Conditions of approval may still be placed on a director-level CUP. It'll also still have the same noticing requirements as a CUP, including publication in the newspaper, posting of an on-site sign, and on the city's website, mailing to property owners and owner associations and interested parties within minimum 600-foot radius of the property, 10 days in advance of the director's review. The time and place of where the director's review will take place will be provided on the notice. As part of the noticing procedures on an application, staff will also send the notice to the city manager and city council members at least 10 days in advance of the director's review. The director-level CUP decision is appealable to the Planning Commission if an appeal is filed within 10 days of the date of the director's decision. The director-level CUP would streamline the permitting process as it will cut down on the time required by staff for processing and agenda report preparation. The typical timeframe for a CUP is 3 to 4 months, but it can fluctuate based on the completeness of the project, and it could be shorter or longer than that. It is anticipated that a director-level CUP would take approximately half of that time spent on a regular CUP. Therefore, staff also anticipates that the fee for a director-level CUP would be approximately half of the cost of a traditional CUP. Certain uses have been identified that currently require a CUP that are proposed to be permitted under the director-level CUP. Specifically, this is breweries, wineries, and distilleries, which currently require a CUP and are proposed to be permitted with the director-level CUP in the service commercial, limited manufacturing, light manufacturing, and general manufacturing zones. There's been a lot of interest in these types of uses, and we have seen an uptick in the number of CUPs for these types of uses in the last few years. Because of this type of use is located in industrial zones where the distance to sensitive uses is typically greater, and they only serve alcohol that they manufacture on site, the potential for impacts are typically lower than that of a bar or a cocktail lounge or other type of uses that provide alcohol. To streamline the process, the ordinance amendment proposes to allow breweries, wineries, and distilleries with or without a tasting room under the director-level CUP. Next is daycare nurseries or commercial daycares. This is another use that is proposed to be permitted under the director-level CUP in each of the commercial zones. This will provide for more consistency across zones, which currently require Planning Commission approval of a CUP or Commercial Plan Development Permit. This is also consistent with the Economic Development Strategic Plan, as it provides quality childcare options essential to the workforce. Initially, the zoning ordinance amendment included a proposal to allow restaurants to sell alcoholic beverages for off-site consumption with the director-level CUP. For example, this would have allowed restaurant patrons to purchase a bottle of wine to take home. However, on January 1st of this year, SB 389 became effective, which gives restaurants off-sales privileges, so they are currently allowed to sell alcoholic beverages for off-site consumption. SB 389 is scheduled to end on December 31st of 2026. If that is not extended, the city may revisit initiating a zoning ordinance amendment before this expiration date. However, because restaurants are currently allowed to sell alcoholic beverages for off-site consumption under SB 389, staff has removed this from the proposed zoning ordinance amendment. So with that, in conclusion, it's the recommendation of staff and the Planning Commission to approve the proposed zoning ordinance amendment.
Thank you very much. Questions, Mr. Kildee?
Yeah. Jackie, the reason why we're doing this is, will this speed up the process? Is that what we're trying to do here?
Yes, it would definitely streamline the process. There would be less time necessary for the whole review process and agenda preparation, which typically takes about 30 days from start of the agenda preparation to when we get to a hearing. So that would definitely be shortened by about half the time.
Okay, but in no way, shape, or form is this lessening the requirements for this. It's just merely speeding up the process here because there's fewer hoops to go through. Is that a fair statement?
These are intended for uses that would typically have less potential for there being impacts to the surrounding neighborhood. So there would be a very less likelihood for there to be, certain issues or concerns that would have to be reviewed and analyzed. So these are, specific uses that we've identified that we currently have in the city, and they haven't been really a source of problems. And we feel it is appropriate for these types of uses that still should have some discretion in reviewing, but we feel that they could also benefit from a streamlined process.
And do we look for, growth in the future in these areas? Will there be more permits that will have to be processed?
We, for now, we're just looking at these two specific types of uses, the breweries and wineries, and then the daycares. But in the future, there may be other code amendments where we may want to consider also having the director level CUP to allow those. But this is also, I think, going to encourage these types of uses as well, or it would help to kind of open up some of the barriers that some people may feel are associated with having to apply for the CUP, whether it's the cost or the timing to be able to open up a daycare facility or to have their own brewery or their winery. It would just kind of streamline the process, and also we anticipate the cost for the application would be lower.
And I just have one more. Could you explain to me again about that new SB law and how this is going to, we're going to be able to implement this not in lieu of, but in addition to the state law?
Sure. So SB 389, it was a law that just became effective. And initially, it kind of arose out of the COVID pandemic, where during that time, ABC authorized restaurants to be able to have off-sales privileges because people weren't able to dine inside restaurants. So they wanted the restaurants to have the ability to be able for their patrons to purchase a meal with alcohol to go. So this basically creates, I guess, till 2026, that extends that right to restaurants to be able to sell alcohol to go. And so initially, when we first started this zoning ordinance amendment, it was kind of at the very beginning or right before the pandemic. And so we were planning on doing this, having this be as part of the director level CUP, but the state kind of beat us to it. And right now, restaurants are currently allowed to do this without any requirement for a CUP.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Jackie, I think I have two. One, any business that's currently operating in any particular zone that is not authorized, not an authorized use, this does not impact them or have anything to do with them. In no way does it grandfather them into anything. They're still operating outside the allowable uses within the respective zone.
Correct.
And then, for some reason, it's just not clicking for me. In 19.62.010, intent and purpose, item B, it says uses existing on the effective date of the ordinance codified in this chapter, which are listed as permitted, subject to conditional use permit or special use permit in the zone in which they are located, may continue without securing such a permit. However, any extension or expansion of such use, may require a conditional use permit for such extension or expansion. Okay. I kept reading shall as opposed to may. So now it's, okay, we'll have to look to see.
That
whether
was,
it's subject to.
It was intended for, say, there was a grocery store or a liquor store that was able to sell alcoholic beverages for, to go. And then at some point, after they've been already in business for several years, the city adopts a code that now requires that type of use to have a conditional use permit. And this is what had happened several years ago. So that liquor store was grandfathered in, but if they expanded, like they expanded into the suite next door, then they would have to then come to the city and get the conditional use permit.
Okay. All right. That's all I had. Thank you. Any additional questions or discussion? In this case, I'll look for a motion if there is
You
one.
want to request a reading of the
Well, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, public hearing.
Man, I am just falling down on the job. I'm going to open the public hearing. I will take the silence as no one wishing to come forward, so we will close it. And we didn't have any comments, I presume, submitted. So we will close the public hearing. I'll turn it over to my colleagues for discussion or a motion.
Request a reading of the title.
A refresh reading of the title. I should have drank coffee before I came to the meeting today. Sorry.
I'm ready. This is ordinance number 2022-1196, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo, California, amending the Camarillo Municipal Code to create a director-level conditional use permit, CUP, process and allow for certain uses subject to a director-level approval of a CUP.
Move to waive further reading and introduce the ordinance.
I'll second.
All right, with that, I have a motion and a second. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to item W, Landlord Tenant Mediation Ordinance Amendment.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. Before you tonight is a proposed amendment to the Landlord Tenant Mediation Ordinance, which was adopted earlier this year in January. The proposed changes have been reviewed by the Policy Committee and aim to provide additional clarifications and definitions to address lease terms and multi-year lease agreements, as well as minor clerical amendments. The Policy Committee recommended this amended ordinance be presented to the City Council for consideration and suggested it be reviewed after 1 year to evaluate the new mediation program. The recommendation before you tonight is to request a reading for the title of the ordinance and waive further reading. This concludes my report, and I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions? Well, I'll look to the members of the Policy Committee to see if they want to say anything.
We discussed it and came up with what is in the packet.
That's a very
I
thorough.
don't think you need
Thank
to
you.
have us discuss it any further.
Well, that's a hint if I've ever seen it.
I have a comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
For the succinct response?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Nothing else? All right, and in that case, I'll request a reading of the title of the ordinance.
Ordinance number 1197, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo, California, amending and restating Camarillo Municipal Code, Chapter 10.50, Landlord Tenant Mediation.
Move to waive further reading and introduce the ordinance.
I'll second them. Second.
All right, I have a motion by Mrs. Craven. I have a second by Mr. Kildee. Please vote. That passes unanimously. And then we'll move on to item X, urgency ordinance to implement additional water conservation measures. Mr. Kotzel.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and City Council. As predicted, we are back with another water conservation item. This time to update the current urgency water conservation ordinance to align with the Metropolitan Water District requirement, which was released on June 14th, to limit the duration of residential outdoor watering to 10 minutes, 1 day per week. And that requirement is it's required to be implemented by September 1st. So that's why we're before you tonight. The proposed new urgency, attached the agenda report, ordinance, will revise the 15-minute limit in the city's current ordinance, adopted by council on June 22nd, to 10 minutes per station, 1 day per week. The timing limit only applies to residential outdoor watering, as the current ordinance already prohibits watering of non-functional turf with potable water at commercial, industrial, and institutional sites and common turf areas of homeowners associations, condominiums, apartments, and retirement communities. The new urgency ordinance will remain in effect until repealed by the City Council and includes the same water conservation measures as in the current ordinance, 1195. That current ordinance will be repealed by the new urgency ordinance if council acts on that tonight. The proposed ordinance includes the continued goal of 20 to 30% reduction in water use, limiting outdoor watering to 1 day per week with the 10-minute per station limit, and prohibiting the watering of the non-functional turf at the locations that I had already mentioned. Drip-type irrigation systems and the use of recycled water remain exempt from the 1 day per week restrictions. Hand watering of trees, shrubs, and ground cover by bucket or hose is still allowed to maintain the health of those that landscaping and those important assets to prevent soil erosion and fire hazards. Irrigation of functional turf, including community parks, community event and recreational areas, athletic fields, and golf courses, is still allowed, only as necessary to maintain the health of that functional turf, with a goal still of 30% reduction in water use. I think it's apparent you see that around the community where those functional turf areas aren't as green as they have been in past years, including our park here at Constitution Park. Use of potable water for agricultural irrigation must continue to be reduced by 20 to 30% also. The city's vigorous public information campaign to notify city water customers of the increased level of water conservation requirements continues. The focus continues on gaining customer compliance. We've increased the level of monitoring, notification, education, and enforcement of the water conservation requirements with a focus on helping city water customers understand the prohibitions, the limits, and achieve compliance. When necessary, penalties for violations of the urgency ordinance may be applied in compliance with the Camarillo Municipal Code. As I mentioned, it's noticeable around town that folks are using less water for outdoor irrigation. It is happening. The city is doing its part also to conserve water, reducing irrigation of landscaping maintained by the city to minimal levels while making sure those valuable assets of trees, shrubs, and ground cover and functional turf survives. The public may have noticed brown grass where sprinklers have been shut off at city areas of non-functional turf, including the east and south sides of the library, some of the turf area at the old library on Ponderosa, and a couple small areas here on the south side of City Hall. Continued significant water conservation by everyone is necessary to comply with the state and metropolitan water district requirements, and we may see further restrictions on the use of water, including the possibility of zero outdoor water use. That remains to be seen, and if that occurs, we will be back before City Council to present and propose adopting further restrictions. So that concludes my report tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from my colleagues? Mr. Kildee?
Dave, if this does get approved, and how are we going to get the word out to our constituents and users about what the new reg potentially will be?
We will be updating our current information that's on several platforms, on our social media platforms and outreach, on a news release. On our city website, we've got a very significant effort of information already there, so that will be updated. We're continue to get a large number of calls that come in to the city, to the water division. We were already actually preempting and saying, when people ask about that this is coming. I mean, it's a requirement, so we anticipate council to go forward with this ordinance since it is a requirement to change this watering. So we're taking all those avenues that we already have been to inform our customers.
Dave, do you know if there's any statistical or empirical data that shows how Camarillo proper is doing with their water conservation?
Yeah, there definitely has been a reduction in the comparison with 2020 water usage, and it's somewhere down around a 15% reduction is what the numbers are showing at this point.
And not 30.
The goal is 20 to 30%?
Correct.
Okay. Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions? I have one or two. Yeah, just to be clear, we're effectively being required to adopt this.
That's correct.
Yeah, Metropolitan is saying jurisdictions in which we serve need to adopt this.
Correct.
And enforce this.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Can you touch on what are we doing? I know I've spoken to you about in the past. What are we doing to either encourage or educate or reach out to residents who, in light of the fact that their yards are dying, want to take this opportunity to replace that turf, or whatever it is that was in their yard that's now probably dead, with something else, whether it's artificial turf and or more drought-tolerant plants and whatnot.
Right. Yeah, what we are is providing the information that that's available now. It's somewhat of a challenging message because it's ideal if if we increase the amount of water reduction as much as possible, which means if you don't have to plant anything new, don't, because that's going to take water to water that. However, there's not a prohibition against planting new plants, and especially anything new planted would have to conform with our reduced water use landscaping guidelines. So it's that message of we definitely aren't allowing any new turf to be planted, but there is a way if somebody wants to replace and then install new landscaping that is allowed, although we're providing that information caveating with it. If we go to if we have to go to a zero outdoor watering situation, that's may not be the best decision to plant new plant material now. So it's really providing all that information as clearly and concisely as possible. Our information on the website and that we're providing customers when they ask is according to those requirements. As clear as possible. It's good people are calling with questions and we're able to educate and guide and direct. But there is a path forward for people to reduce their water use, and that's what we're looking for, is to maximize that reduction as much as possible.
If they did drought-tolerant plants but put it on a drip irrigation system, I know you're reaching your crystal ball here, but even in a zero out-day watering ordinance, I presume that hand watering and drip irrigation systems would probably still be permissible as they are now?
I guess that remains to be seen. right? I hesitate to speak definitively on that without seeing what that next step is going to be. The current restriction to 1 day a week, even this timing of watering is somewhat unspecific and allows some flexibility to comply. So it'll just be interesting to see how that, if we go to zero outdoor watering, if there is any ability to still allow the drip irrigation or hand watering. All indications are that the powers to be that are making these decisions completely understand the need to maintain the urban forest, mature trees, functional recreation space. So in my opinion, that still remains and would be a factor. Overall, I think and I believe more information will be shared coming up here on a report out on the drought task force locally. But in essence, the conservation efforts are occurring. It's a mixed bag. Some places not as much conservation as others, or some really no measurable at all for state water project usage of water. What I'm getting at is there's actually initially the first indications from Metropolitan were we're going to have to be looking at September possibly going to zero outdoor. Now the indication is that likely won't happen until October. So that is an indication of better news than not. And if things can continue on the conservation front, hopefully we can not have to enact further restrictions.
Sorry, lastly, I got a question because what the Kardashians and Kevin Durant or whatnot and Las Virgenes just got, called out for their obscene water use. In light of that, have we identified, I'm not saying we do the same thing, but have we identified individuals or households or users who are using an absorbent amount of water and trying to proactively reach out to them and work with them? Maybe some of them don't know. Maybe they have leaks in their, in something that they're not aware of. But are we doing any kind of proactive outreach to large water consumers and seeing how, we can work with a few targeted individuals or households or companies or whatnot in reducing water and encouraging and trying to achieve a greater dent in that?
Right. Not so much a specific person by person or property by property owner yet. That is an area that we could go to. It's been more of a focus on capturing those users also in the whole message of reducing the outdoor watering. But that we definitely have, and I will say when and often it is a leak type of a situation that our meter reads make obvious, and staff will be in touch with that property owner to assist and take a look at what's going on here kind of thing. So it's been more on a customer service resulting from a high meter read, not necessarily looking at, over a year's time, who are the high users and targeting in education and changing things. But that is an item that we can look into if we feel necessary.
Yeah, I would just think going after the whales, so to speak, large water users. I mean, they have legitimate consumption or uses for consumption, but trying to proactively seeing if we, through just a few targeted interactions, that we can make significant dents, because maybe in helping them reduce their water consumption, it will equate to so many other households who, we don't have the time to visit and help, one-on-one educate every single one, but we can make some significant inroads maybe with just a few targeted ones. But, all right, yes, sure, go ahead.
I just have a short comment, and then I'll make a motion to read the title. Yeah, just to clarify something you said earlier about Metropolitan imposing these restrictions, it is only the state water project dependent areas of Metropolitan that are subject to these restrictions. But there's about 6 million of us that are subject to them. There's another 13 million plus that are not, which is the whole idea, and actually the whole idea of being a second-class citizen of Metropolitan. And I actually, under council comments, have a PowerPoint later to kind of bring you up to speed on what's going on with the drought task force. So With that, if it's okay, I would request for a reading of the title of the ordinance. If you think-
I didn't want to steal your thunder. I could have brought it up.
No, thanks. I request a reading of the title of the ordinance.
Yes.
All right. This is ordinance, urgency ordinance number 1198, an urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Camarillo, California, declaring water conservation measures with a goal of 20 to 30% reduction in water use.
I'd move to waive further reading and adopt an urgency ordinance as set forth in the agenda recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote. That passes unanimously. That just gets us down to oral communications. And Tony, I know you have slides. Would you like to go first?
I think it's going to be about 10 minutes. Is that okay, or you want to put me near the last, or?
Let you go first.
Okay, all right.
I think it's really pertinent, and if there's anyone out there in TV land still watching, then I would love for them to get educated.
No worries. I'm going to take this up. For meetings attended, July 28th, the Policy Committee. For August 10th and 11th, the CASA conference, as Ms. Craven and I spoke about earlier this evening. On August 15th, I testified at 2 committee meetings at Metropolitan Water District. On August 16th, we attended the school crossing guard breakfast, or 4 of us did. August 16th, I testified at the Metropolitan Water District Board meeting. August 17th, I had a Metrolink Ad Hoc Fuel Hedging Committee meeting. August 18th and 19th was the Mobility 21 conference, and on behalf of VCTC, I spoke as a chair of a county transportation commission regarding Ventura County transportation issues at that conference. On August 21, it was fun to work as a volunteer in the Rotary Beer booth at Wings Over Camarillo. And today, August 24, Drought Response Task Force. I had 2 items I wanted to bring up tonight with regard to school crossing guards. And I was privileged to sit with a group of crossing guards at our breakfast, and we all know that they serve a critically important function of public safety. So that, there's really nothing more important than keeping our school kids safe. And at my table, we had a great discussion on how to try to improve things, because we need more crossing guards. There aren't enough right now. We're recruiting. So how do we get additional people to step forward? And I asked for the input, and here's what I was told, that there should be a recognition that the crossing guards, who are mostly retirees, do view this job and they look forward to having the supplemental income from the job, from the position. Sometimes they need a day off, like for a medical appointment or so on. And sometimes, and we ought to recognize that there ought to be some operational flexibilities. And so, for example, alternates who might be familiar with 4 or 5 individual school sites, but can who are trained to be school crossing guards and are familiar with specific sites. I guess the analogy I would draw would be like for a cover car for Camarillo Police Department, and is able to go into different areas. So all of them receive training. So I know that we had a recent market study on this, and we looked at it at budget time, but I would ask that we consider 2 things on this item, and to try to attract more school crossing guards, and that is to potentially increase the pay. It's currently $17.50 per hour. My understanding is Caneo is offering $21 per hour, a little bit more robust in terms of this. But again, this is, in my opinion, critical from a public safety standpoint, and to see what we might be able to do in terms of operational flexibility, with the analogy being the CPD cover cars. The second item on school crossing guards is I think we need, and I'd like Commander Tennyson to speak to this, right now at the start of school, and school for Pleasant Valley started today, additional traffic enforcement around the schools and additional parent education. One of the most pointed remarks that I received was from a crossing guard who very professionally said, "Hey, I basically had a sign right in front of a parent, and they rolled down their fully tinted windows from their car and said, 'Doesn't matter, I'm driving through you,' and they did." Which is extraordinary, really reckless from a public safety standpoint. And I have received comments from parents in a number of schools, Las Colinas in particular, about parents. So I not observing the traffic laws, so I would ask for some more, get Commander Tennyson's expertise on this, ask for some additional traffic enforcement, and I kind of wanted to know, what are we doing, if anything, with respect to additional parent education? And what is Pleasant Valley School District doing with respect to additional parent education?
Yeah, so the Pleasant Valley School District has been following our lead on a lot of these issues. So we did a press release last week discussing the increase in vehicle versus pedestrian and vehicle versus bicycle collisions that we've had in Camarillo. And in that long press release, we had a bunch of tips for drivers, tips for people walking, and tips for people who are riding bicycles on what they can do. The Pleasant Valley School District shared that across their social media sites. About 2 weeks ago, they sent out a letter to all their parents discussing safety of kids being dropped off at school, and requirements and tips for drivers who are coming there. You know, show up on time, don't try and do the last minute thing. Recognize where you drop your kids off is just as important, so you're not putting kids in harm's way by where you're dropping them off. And then just yesterday, they sent out another notice to all families in the district. And then for our part, we're going to be doing bicycle safety classes. We've already got assemblies scheduled at all 3 middle schools here over the next 2 or 3 weeks. So we'll be doing more education of the children, but we've also done it for the parents, and the school district has sent notices and letters out to all the families of children in the district as well.
Okay.
So it's really we're focusing on education right now. At the start of the school year, we have all of our traffic unit doing extra patrol at drop-off and pickup time, and then all of our SROs are out as well. I was at the schools myself today, so we're really focusing in these first 2 weeks of school coming back in on being very visible and pulling people over and doing enforcement where it's needed, because we need to make sure we set the tone as we start the school off on what the expectations are. So it's a combined, starting out with education, and we're doing extra enforcement as well.
Thank you very much, Commander Tennyson. If I could get on the first item, if there's a second council member who might be interested in seeing whether or not there's anything we could do to kind of sweeten the pot, as it were, or try to attract more school crossing guards as an agenda item sometime in the future.
I'll
There's no
second
hurry
that.
on that, but if I could, thank you.
I'll certainly second that.
Thanks for that. And then before I start talking about water, and I know we've got a PowerPoint on that, I was hopeful that we could adjourn this meeting tonight in memory of Supervisor Ramirez. With her tragic passing, it's a real loss. And I was privileged to serve with Supervisor Ramirez. I knew her, I first met her back in the 1990s. Both lawyers, working on matters, and I was privileged to serve with her on 4 separate public entity boards. And she was thoughtful and kind and incisive, and was just a wonderful colleague. It's someone you'd want on your board, and that's Carmen. So, so with that, Christy, could I at the dais are hard copies of all of this, and I wanted to bring you up to speed, basically with respect to. I'm going to take this off. 2 separate items. One is the Emergency Water Conservation Program, and Kevin, Councilmember Caddy, this goes to one of the questions you had. Is there any way to expand that just a little bit? Kind of hard to see that. And the second is with respect to the regional reliability issue. Okay, well, it's a little difficult to see that, but you've got the hard copies of this at your desk, and thanks to our wonderful city clerks for getting this all to you. But remember that what has been going on is Metropolitan Water District, which serves about 19 million people, including 6 million of us in the state water, state water project dependent areas on which these restrictions are levied, are looking at our progress on reducing imported water use. And they are looking at whether different wholesalers within Metropolitan, including Callegas and Las Virgenes, that's great that you got to expand that, thank you, expand that, They are looking, they've established agency-specific volumetric delivery limits, and they're looking, and Callegas calculated those volumetric limits, just like all the other wholesalers like City of Los Angeles, Las Virgenes, et cetera. And in any event, that is what they are comparing to, because the volumetric limits are based on what's called an equivalent share of health and human safety water, human health and safety water available from the Department of Resources, which is about 55 gallons per capita per day, plus any additional water that Metropolitan can supply from the State Water Project system. So, with that in mind, this first slide, I think the top is obscured, but the first slide, I think, is what's going on with the state water. Can we put that down just a little bit? Get the top in there? Okay, so that's all state water project dependent agencies as of August 22. That's just today. Those are new numbers. And so the performance overall within Metropolitan of all of its state water dependent agencies is 2% under. And that's good. Let's see. This is going to go to the next slide, right, Christy? We hope so. Okay. Hey, very good. So here it is for Callegas. And you can see that Callegas is not doing as well. Callegas, if it were just Callegas, the agencies within Callegas are about 14% over those limits. And there's two surveys or two graphs in your materials. One of just August of 22, and the second is an extended period between June to December 22. But the take-home message is Callegas is still running over. All right, this is an example of Inland Empire, a utilities agency, large agency on the east side, what they're doing, and they are 20% under their limits.
Excuse me, Councilmember Tremblay. This might be an item that you'd want to put on for a future agenda for further discussion.
Okay, I realize it wasn't agendized. This is from the Drought Task Force report. If I cut to the chase in about 30 seconds, is that okay?
Yeah, that would be fine. It's just if it's going to go on much longer, I would suggest it be put on a future agenda. But if you want to wrap it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I would request that we put it on for the next agenda, but for now, I'll simply tell you that when Metropolitan is looking at this, they're looking at all of the state water project agencies together, how they're doing, not just Callegas. So far, we're making some progress. City of Camarillo is 10% under on its allocation. Camarosa is a significant percentage over, but we're all waiting to see how this comes out. And as Mr. Klotzel said earlier, it appears that Metropolitan is deferring a decision from September 1 to October 1 on whether deferring a decision on potential zero times per week outdoor irrigation. And as a second item, if I could ask that we put on the agenda, and that is Metropolitan's significant passage of its equitable supply reliability resolution on August 16, because that's something that we always wanted to know. Remember, our teachers always asked us what we've been doing during summer recess? That's what we've been doing during summer recess, is working on that issue. So if we could come back and make it as an agenda item, that would be great. That okay, Mr. Pierrick? We're good?
That's excellent.
And then with the final ask that we adjourn in memory of Supervisor Ramirez, that would be great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely. If I can ask a question of Mr. Pierrick, where does the line drawn in relative to oral communications? Can Mr. Tremblay not give a 30-minute presentation if he wishes to if there is no concrete discussion amongst colleagues up here on the dais?
Well, what the Brown Act refers to is council members making a brief report on their activities. So that's why I was recommending that, given the amount of information that that Mr. Tremblay has to share, and that I would, my advice would be that it be as an agendized item for a future discussion to have further discussion on it.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and I will certainly agendize it going forward.
With respect to both the EWCP, this material, and the regional reliability resolution, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, there's a lot of meat to this, and I think it's worth
and I understand
reviewing,
Mr.
and it's worth discussing to the extent we want to.
I do too, and anyway, but I certainly understand City Attorney's perspective. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Craven?
Before
Oh, I'm
other
sorry, I'm
people?
sorry. Mr. Kildee, yeah, we're going to take you last. Sorry. Mr. Kildee.
Let's see, meetings attended was the investment committee, and I just really, short here, I have well, he's turned out to be a very good friend of mine. Bill Little's going to be relocating to Milwaukee to be closer to his family, and I actually went out to breakfast this morning with Bill, and loves Camarillo. It's really hard for him to go, but we'll have more information later on that. But I would like to make a couple of comments about Supervisor Ramirez, if I may. I had the pleasure of knowing Carmen for several years. I served on several county committees, animal regs. Currently, she was a supervisor representative for VCOG. But back in the early days, we also got to know each other from EDC-VC. And Carmen represented the very best in an elected official that you could ask for. In my opinion, if you were to clone an elected official, you'd have that clone look a lot like Carmen. In her mind, it really didn't matter where you came from. She was always extremely respectful from your point of view. And that is a rare commodity at times. Carmen definitely had her own feelings and wants and desires and, the way things ought to be, but she really respected other people's opinions as well, too. And it was a very untimely death for Carmen. She's going to be missed. She was an incredible representative from Oxnard, and you could not help but like Carmen. I mean, Carmen liked everybody, and everybody liked her. And she's going to be missed. She's going to be really missed on VCOG here. She was a really important member, and it was a very untimely death. So with that, I wanted to make those comments, and I really had the pleasure of knowing Carmen quite well, and I'm going to miss her, and she's going to be missed. So with that, that's all I have tonight.
Ms. Intangelo.
Okay, for meetings attended, August 17th was CPA Executive Committee. Our regular Board of Directors meeting was canceled on August 4th. August 6th was concert in the park. August 8th, the mayor and I attended the active shooter training at Rancho Rosal, which was somber. It's not something you want to have to go to and experience, but I'm glad that we're doing it and that we're prepared and ready. August 19th, Mr. Kildee and the mayor and I were invited to do the coin flip for the opening football game for Camarillo High School. That was a lot of fun. I'm really glad they invited us out there. And then after that, I ran over to Poker for the Parks for the PVRPD fundraiser. And then on August 20th, enjoyed a really nice day at the air show. I was not able to make the crossing guard breakfast, but thank you for sharing your experience, Mr. Tremblay. I was working. I wanted to be there. I'm going to have trouble with this because before Carmen was a colleague of mine, she was a friend of mine. And I still can't believe she's not with us. I still don't have words. It's been some time. I still don't have words to say except that she is sorely missed and that she was such a voice for people without voices and for our environment and sustainability. And she will be sorely, sorely missed. She already is, but I have to stop. But I am glad that we are adjourning in her name and her memory. Thank you.
Thank you. August 8th, I attended CCCI Site Authority meeting. Also August 8th, as Ms. Intangelo alluded to, or I mentioned, I attended the active shooter training at Rancho Rosal. There was 3 different agencies represented in this training, so Ventura County Sheriff's deputies, officers from CSU Channel Islands, and also officers from the Community College District. So I was really impressed that it was not just the Ventura County Sheriffs conducting it. They were working in tandem with other agencies, other departments, because obviously, as was explained to me, when the call goes out, any one of these 3 would likely respond to a school shooting in our jurisdiction. So Rancho Rosal is special to me because that's where my wife teaches. So I certainly want the Sheriff's Department to be very familiar with that school, and I appreciate the fact that that's the one they are training at. So it's unfortunate that's the world we live in today, but if it ever happens, and God forbid, we're going to be prepared for it. So August 16th, attended the Crossing Guard breakfast, and that was great. Trying to read my chicken scratch here. August 19th, I attended Ms. Santanjo mentioned, Adolfo Camarillo High School opening football game. Got to the coin toss. Camarillo won the coin toss. Camarillo won the game. That was a really good game. Yeah, that was fine. I had nothing to do with that coin toss. It was just luck, but it all went on in our favor. And then their skill won the game. So, but they were playing against Hart, and as I was told, Hart used to be, and Mr. Gildee and I were talking about it, but Hart used to be, and I was talking to a few other people about it, and everyone said, oh, Hart's a really good school, really good team. I said, wow, we blew them out of the water. Kudos. August 21st, attended Wings Over Camarillo, and that was awesome. I actually have not attended an air show like that as of late. I've always watched it from afar outside the gates. So it was cool to be really close to that runway and watch the planes take off and do everything. August 16th, I also attended EV Advocates meeting. As I mentioned before, they have their meetings here in Camarillo. Frequent our restaurants and whatnot, so I like to go. Obviously, I believe in that mission, but I also appreciate nonprofit org, meeting here in Camarillo that represents the entire county. So there's we run down a whole list of all the different just updates countywide, who's installing chargers, where they're going in. So I'm excited to hear that there's potential for large charging network in Camarillo. It's being scoped out. I won't say more than that right now. But if we can bring greater charging network to Camarillo, that'd be all the better. So lastly, and I'll tack on to what everyone else has already said, a lot has already been said about Carmen Ramirez. I knew of her. I've met her just for a brief time, a few times, so I didn't know her personally, extensively. But I had one-on-one discussions with her from time to time, and she was a terrific human being. She was a terrific supervisor, public servant. Look no further than who's speaking of her and what they're saying about her to understand her contributions and her impacts in not only her community in Oxnard, but countywide. She drove a lot of change. She drove a lot of good. That'll be sorely missed. But if she did anything to inspire the next person to serve, then and I know she has, she's inspired countless number of individuals to public service and further encouraged and mentored those who are already in it. And she has left quite a legacy and quite an impact. So it doesn't, with Carmen gone, Carmen's not gone. Her work will continue through all those that she inspired, she touched, and she mentored. So that will keep on giving. So we will certainly adjourn in her memory. Mrs. Craven.
Okay, I attended a policy committee meeting on the 28th. I attended an investment committee meeting on the 23rd. At the CASA conference, I attended a state ledge committee meeting and a federal ledge committee meeting. I'm like the mayor. I didn't know Carmen Ramirez personally. I wasn't even on any committees with her, so I didn't know her very well. But from what I've read and what I've heard from a lot of people, she was a wonderful woman, and she did a lot of good, and I hope the governor very carefully considers who he appoints to replace her with. I would like to ask that we adjourn also in memory of Vida Waddle Zepp. She may not be a household word in Camarillo, but I first met Vida on March 17th, 1982, at a meeting to revive the Camarillo Fiesta, and a lot of us just showed up. We didn't know anybody else particularly who was showing up, and Vida had a lot of ideas, and I thought, oh my, we'll never get all this stuff done. And she was one who came up with ideas and didn't depend on other people to implement them. She did the work to bring them to, bring her wishes to fruition all by herself. In fact, for the first 10 fiestas after the Club Civico gave it up, she rounded up all of the entertainment, both dancing and music. She did all of the decorations, and she even went out all year long looking for costumes, and she found costumes for all of the Fiesta Committee members. And a lot of years she had different costumes for us. So I would like to, and she was involved in other organizations, but my only association with Vida was for the 10 years she was associated with the Camarillo Fiesta Association, and she was a real driving force in getting that revived. So I would like to also adjourn in her memory. So tonight, I'm going to give you my recollections on how long it's taken for some developments to be approved and built out. And I'm doing this mainly because we've received a lot of messages lately on how long it takes for general plan amendments to go through the process before being approved or disapproved. And a project has a lot of twists and turns between a time of proposal is submitted and when it receives final approval or not. And so these are some of my recollections about those twists and turns. First, Mission Oaks. Mission Oaks is not what a lot of people refer to as everything east of the Callegas Creek. It's everything that was built under the Pardee Master Plan, which was approved in September 1970 with 1,150 acres of the Camarillo Ranch annexed after it was approved in December of 1970. The first tract was built was Sunset Point at the corner of Mission Oaks Boulevard and Wood Creek, which sold out by the time I moved to Camarillo in 1975. The second tract was Trailside, just east of Sunset Point, and that was under construction in 1976. When the voters passed Measure A, the Growth Control Initiative, in 1982, Pardee sued the city, saying their approved master plan gave them development rights. That suit went before the California Supreme Court twice. The court said, yes, they did have development rights, but the growth control ordinance only controlled the timing of when they can build. It didn't affect their rights. That decision was rendered shortly after I was first elected in 1986. After that, it took a lot longer than Pardee had anticipated. It took 27 years to build out the plan. Home construction was completed by the end of 2007, although follow-up work continued through 2017. And this does not mention the Pope Ranch, which was not part of the Mission Oaks master plan. Second is Airport North. At least 40 years ago, probably 45, D. Wayne Jones, a dentist who lived in Camarillo, submitted a proposal for a shopping center and a hotel at the southwest intersection of the 101 and Las Posas Road. The proposal got to the city council twice, failing both times. Doc Jones lost everything, including his home. Later, another developer submitted a somewhat similar plan, but without the hotel, and it was approved in July 1986, just before I was elected. Although what many of us call the Target Center is thriving, the plan has been amended a few times, with several developers proposing to develop all the way to the industrial development to the west on Aviador, but the remaining land has not developed. For 36 years, I've heard nothing but a lot of big talk about that property, and what will actually happen there is yet to be seen. The third one I'm going to talk about is Spanish Hills. The request for Hilltop development was submitted in May of 1985. It came to the council in July of 1987, and it was the first development I voted on. A man named Bones Maloney represented Wayne Reeder, the developer. Bones had quite a line. However, the residents of the estates lined up quite an opposition. I went to take a look one Sunday afternoon. Oh my. As my husband and I climbed up that hill, we saw water heaters, wrecked cars, horse trails, spent bullets from target practice, illegally dumped landscaping debris among the chaparral. I developed such an asthma attack that my husband had to carry me back to the car, and before that I didn't even know I had asthma. When the public hearing opened, many folks testified about the pitfalls of the development. Some wanted their carpets and draperies cleaned because of construction dust. Others wanted their houses painted after all the dust had settled. Some wanted a white gate across Ramona Place so that those people could not drive down their street. Some wanted feeding stations for rabbits that would be displaced. Some wanted free lifetime memberships to the country club. Excuse me. And all of them felt that their home values would be diminished. That was my first GPA public hearing. I didn't know the lingo, and I sat up here wondering how on earth lots that were supposedly going to sell for $1 million could possibly lower the property values of homes that were going for $250,000 at the time. The public hearing went on, and our deliberations went even longer. It was about 2 a.m. when we approved it, but shortly after that, a lot of problems arose. 3 months after the hearing, we discovered that all the city's money had been lost. Mr. Reeder went to prison because of a sales scheme at another development. Hilltop Development was sold to an Orange County company which had developed other golf courses. They changed the name to Mission de Camarillo, but the economy took a big downturn and the project was resold to the Bank of Tokyo, which changed the name of the project to Spanish Hills. In 1989, the council began the process of establishing a Mello-Roos district to provide funding for utilities, bridges, drainage, and streets. The Mello-Roos area included the vacant land below the hills on both sides of the freeway. 3 years after approval, I, as mayor, helped with a small, very small, groundbreaking ceremony for the Spanish Hills Country Club estates. It was just me, City Manager Bill Little, a translator, and people from the Bank of Tokyo, who bragged that they had never backed away from a project and they would see this one through to completion. They had no idea what they were getting into. There was a recession. Lots didn't sell. There was rain. Oh, was there rain. In 1992, you ready for this? We got 20 inches of rain. In 1993, there was 22 inches of rain. 1994 was normal, but in 1995, we got 25 inches of rain, and that was right there because at that time there was a rain gauge down at Springville. Many of us thought we'd be flooded out, and from the freeway, it looked like Spanish Hills did get flooded out. They'd grade and fill ravines, some of which were more than 75 feet deep. Then it would rain and wash them all away. They'd grade and fill again and again, and rain washed it out again and again. In all, 26 million cubic yards, or 31 million tons of dirt was moved. We mapped faults and potential faults, which showed a fault under where some houses were planned. Maps were redrawn so that a street, not homes, would be over the fault. Homes could not be built closer than 50 feet from a fault or a suspected fault. They also had to build a concrete or earthen, and I still don't know which it was, but a dam to keep the problematic ravine from failing after construction. By the way, we did such a good job of mapping potential faults that what we did soon became the statewide standard. 5 years after the groundbreaking and 8 years after approval, I again as mayor attended the grand opening of Spanish Hills Country Club in June of 1997. What a night that was. Only a handful of lots had been sold, but the country club was filled to capacity and spilled over onto the lawn with people from all over the nation. Slowly but surely, lots began to sell as the economy turned up again, but a lot of them were auctioned off. Yes, the White Gate still closes Ramona Place. No, we didn't approve any rabbit feeding stations. And yes, the Bank of Tokyo did see it through to completion, but they lost a lot of money on that deal. So the fourth one I want to talk about is Springville. A very, very large family with members who own different numbers of shares of two companies called Ran and Rancho submitted plans in 1987 to develop farmland between the base of Spanish Hills and the freeway from Las Posas Road to Central Avenue. There were some problems. Family members had a hard time agreeing on how the development would be divided between the two ownerships and who would get how much money. Much of the land had to be annexed, which was controversial during the very time that the SOAR ordinance was being written. Staff worked on the plan and it was voted down by the council in 1995, 8 years after it was sent off for further study. At one point, an EIR indicated the need for further investigation of a suspected hairline fault. They dug so deep that many of us thought they were digging to China. They finally hired Dennis Hargrave, who first worked on how the development would be divided between the two family companies. Then he worked with staff to revise the plan over another 7-year period, finally winning approval in 2008. Now remember, it had first been submitted in 1987. However, no construction was allowed to begin until the Springville Bridge was completed, and that was in 2012. By then, the economy had turned down again, and now, 37 years after the project was first submitted and 14 years after approval, it is only 80% built out. Note that I did not talk about another piece of property at the southwest corner of the freeway and Pleasant Valley Road. That property had 2 proposals for shopping centers in the 1980s, but a Camarillo Springs resident named Bill Torrance led the charge to defeat both proposals. And when a third GPA request was made for residential development, a citizens' initiative was placed on the ballot to stop all development there without voter approval. Why did I spend so much time meandering from one side of the freeway up and down to the other? I wanted to give you and members of the public an understanding of how long it has taken for some developments in Camarillo to gain approval and what some of the factors have been that have hindered their approval or completion.
Thank you very much. If it takes the Bank of Tokyo to come back to Camarillo and lose a whole lot of money to get more rain, then that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
I don't know, but in those 3 years, they got more rain than we've gotten in the next 20. 25, 20, and 22.
Any additional comments? All right, with that, we've gone through all of our work. We are going to adjourn in the memory of both Supervisor Carmen Ramirez and Vida Waddle-Zeff.
But we're just recessing.
I'm sorry. Yes, we're not going to adjourn, but we're not going to come back either. So we will recess, but when we adjourn, we will adjourn in the memory of both Supervisor Carmen Ramirez and Vita Waddle staff. At this point, we are going to recess it back into closed session. So thank you.